Well, here we are on a beautiful, almost fall day here in our backyard. I'm with Laura Peck, and we are here with yet another episode of Communicate with Power. I don't know, this is our fourth or something like that, or we got to number four yet? I think we are. And so this is kind of a interesting day because we've had so much happen in the past number of days that we felt it was worth having another podcast, particularly focused on something that everybody seems to be talking about, and that, of course, is the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel from his show on ABC TV as a result of his comments regarding Charlie Kirk and what happened to him. So we're going to kick this off. And Laura, why don't I let you take the lead?
Well, we did have some questions today because earlier Barry was on a radio program talking about what has happened with Kimmel being they I don't know if it's a full cancellation, but it sure looks like it.
Yeah.
So Barry also has a background in writing for television. He was actually on a comedy show which he wrote and produced and all of that. So Barry, take us back to when he really did it as a teenager.
Well, that's right. I began actually in stand-up comedy doing comic impressions, all almost always politically oriented kind of humor was always my interest. So hence the Jimmy Kimmel thing. Also did a television series called Shh, It's the News for Global TV. Ran 78 episodes. 78 episodes. And in those years, that was 2 seasons. So you're doing 39 episodes a year. And my partner Ken Shaw and I created that show, and we were one of the writing team on it as well as performing in it. So really, it was a fun background, and I didn't realize back then that I'd be moving into a whole other world, which is doing seminars on and strategies on communication. So that brought me to today. And interestingly enough, the juxtaposition of that with Jimmy Kimmel and the kind of problems that have arisen as a result of his performance earlier this week. So
And so I remember way back when I was a teenager, I used to kind of question, is it okay to make fun of the prime minister and having such a big interest in politics? I found myself laughing, and now I completely love it. In fact, I
yeah,
love political humor, and I've been steeped in it for a very long time. So, Barry, where did you get the chutzpah or the Irish guts
yeah, Irish.
to make fun of politicians and prime ministers and then end up
Yeah,
training them?
yeah, that's interesting. Well, my late brother Stephen, and I began writing our own comedy material. We did it for high school concerts, high school variety shows, and so that really got us started. And once you've tasted the audience kind of laughter and so on, well, you went in talent shows and ended up really that's what I did for a living for a number of years. Uh, so anyway, the bottom line is that it did give me more confidence actually in front of an audience. I used to be very shy and timid kid, hard to believe. But doing impressions of other people gave me the confidence to stand before audiences and gradually move from that into my own voice, really. So,
And I
yeah,
should add that his partner at that time was Ken Shaw, and Ken ended up being the anchor of the CTV News in Toronto
yeah,
with his face on every
yeah.
billboard. But Barry, the origin story has to include also you and Ken went to Hollywood, tried
Yeah.
to make it as writers.
Well, we did pitching a number of television series at the time to the Mary Tyler Moore Show people, the Norman Lear Enterprises, and got a real taste for the reality of that. And we did have a number of different kinds of shows as well back in Canada. But somewhere in there, we were asked would we uh, coach broadcasting students at a local college, Algonquin College here in Ottawa, on how to communicate on camera. The course was called On Camera Techniques. So we each had a cohort that we were training. And Ken wasn't too nuts about it. He did it for a semester, but wasn't really, passionate about it. I loved it. I loved teaching. I took over his semester, for his cohort for the second semester, and really ended up, I realized then, boy, I love coaching how to communicate. That became my thing. And so that's really the origins of how I started to get into coaching others. Uh, Heads of agencies, MPs heard about it, and I ended up coaching them for on camera, and it was heavily about media interviews, and really that was the foundation of our program. When I went off to the Kennedy School at Harvard, I ended up doing seminars down there because they said, anybody here have any seminars that they want to do, and I volunteered mine, and came back to Canada and began to do them. So really, there was an interconnection, no question about it.
And also, there's such a respect. Like we met Seth Rogen and his writing partner, Evan Goldberg. And when they found out that Barry had been a writer in comedy, they wanted to ask him a
Yeah,
lot of
that's funny, huh?
questions. And
Well, Mike Myers, when we met him, not to
yeah,
drop too
same
many
thing.
names
Yeah.
here, he said he was a kid, 15 years old, in Scarborough watching the news. And he said he was fixated, and he started to do lines from the It's the News show, and I thought, wow, that was pretty amazing because who knew? But it just shows you that young people, when they do see on television something that really catches their attention, it can be very influential. Which brings us to Jimmy Kimmel, and people say, well, young people watch these things, but let's talk about that maybe on two levels, Laura. First of all, what he actually said. I'm not going to sit here and quote it back, but was he really criticizing or mocking? I guess would probably be the intimation about what he was doing, mocking Charlie Kirk. The short answer is no. The moment he heard about it, the first time he got to a camera, he extended his condolences to Charlie Kirk's widow, to his kids, and really made it clear that violence had no in any way role to play in this kind of thing at all. So I think he did the right thing, even when he did his now criticized monologue on, I guess it was Monday evening. He began by saying in the killing of Charlie Kirk, he then moved to immediately the political reaction to the murder, and he kind of did a little reference that maybe was somewhat controversial. He alleged that the killer was a MAGA, uh, you know, supporter, which turned out to be false. But he did come from a Republican family. But the early kind of reporting, I remember it was kind of around, oh, were they MAGA? So he and the writing team obviously picked up on that. That turned out to actually be false. But it wasn't really attacking anything about Charlie Kirk. What really he also went after was President Trump's own reaction to it, and played a very funny clip of the president on the runway. I guess he was getting ready to go over to the UK or something, and was asked by a reporter, what's your personal reaction? We feel, he was giving him a very, you nice kind of question in which what was his reaction to that, and he basically said, "I'm fine." He said, the trucks are here and they're going to build this.
Ballroom.
This ballroom at the White House. He went right into that. So he played that. And then the punchline after the video by Jimmy Kimmel was, they say the fourth stage of grief is construction. So it was a good line, and it was appropriate to that response. Who would have expected the president to react that way? So that became, the whole thing's been blown out of proportion. So that's one thing. Did what he say really normally lead to and would lead to you got to be suspended? The answer to that, in my view, is absolutely not. Far more controversial things have been said.
But my question is, and I when I saw Kimmel do it, I thought his first comments were of his own son has had a third heart issue, a third
Yeah, surgery. Yeah.
operation. He took a few days off to be with his son. So the way that he came across, it sounded like he really deeply cared that this has happened because now we have a young widow, we have young children,
Yeah.
and I thought he was relating to that. I wonder, though, if it was sometime in comedy, if they make a joke, then they'll and the reaction is too soon? Is
Yeah.
it too soon?
Yeah.
I've seen that technique used
Definitely.
that.
Yeah. In fact, I think anybody in comedy, probably including myself, have used that line. If you refer to anybody who recently passed away, you're already on thin ice. You're already on the ice gets suddenly very thin beneath your feet.
There was a famous comedian who used to imitate JFK, and he made record albums, and
Von Meter,
he thought his career was
and it
over.
was. Yeah, Von Meter was the impressionist of JFK, and he basically people didn't want to laugh anymore about JFK. That was it. Even though he was very great target for a lot of humorous lines. So I guess the point there is that he was on thin ice. That's true. What he said, I didn't have a problem with. Maybe some people did, but let's put it this way: it was really the major, and this is what I commented on my radio interviews the past few days, has been really about the instant politicization of what occurred.
And freedom of speech.
Yeah, which will, yeah, there's those are the two issues. Let's just talk for a moment about the politicization of it. I mean, instantly from the Oval Office in the first hour or more, maybe 2 hours of after it happened, there was the president, doing a whole rant against leftist radicals who were clearly responsible. He did that without knowing, really, he didn't even know who the shooter was. So that sort of set the tone for a lot of the GOP, a lot of the MAGA people, all focusing. Yes, they were, expressing, of course, great tribute to Charlie Kirk, and that's great. I think that was very, very appropriate. But when they started then blaming who's behind this, and blaming the leftists, radicals, and so on, I think this was completely inappropriate. There was no evidence to support any of that, and he ends up then, it becomes a political football. That's what happened there. And Jimmy Kimmel got caught up in that political football, meaning that the moment you say anything critical about those who are trying to politicize it, then you get to be the target of all that. But I think what's really behind this is, as I said, I hate to sound this way, but the corporatization, if I can use that, of the major networks in the United States has really led now to this. You saw that with Stephen Colbert, where Paramount, Sherry Redstone, the owner of Paramount, was trying to get a deal that required the White House administration approval of a major purchase, and a purchase and sale, I guess it was, to Larry Ellison's son, a company there. So that was a very delicate thing. They own CBS, and in effect, the perceived threat there was, if you allow Colbert to continue doing what he's doing, we're not going to pass this deal that you so desperately need. So basically, in that environment, we can't say this for sure, in fairness, but boy, timing was so highly suspicious within hours and days of this coming to the fore, and then boom, he's gone. So, and you saw that with this, several of the broadcast networks, Sinclair Broadcasting being one of them, that owns about 30 stations, 30 affiliates of ABC. They issued the threat that they're not going to air it. They didn't air it, threatening to cancel if he doesn't apologize, give money, and everything else, which was way over the top in my view. And there's ABC already struggling in ratings, as more and more of these shows in late night can't hold the audiences they used to. Everybody's got their devices and are going everywhere else. It's hard to hold the audience that used to be there for any of them. But there you have it. So that ABC felt, if we don't suspend them, then we're all going down with the ship. So I'm not justifying what ABC did. I'm just trying to put a context into that. And they're going to have to make a very serious decision, because they're going to, I believe, hurt the brand of ABC, that they've done this. CBS is kind of weathering the storm of having announced that Stephen Colbert will be leaving in May. Boy, these are very potentially damaging to the brands of these networks. And both of them paid fines, paid $15 million personally. ABC did to President Trump. We personally pocketed, and they learned, hey, pay up, and the path will clear for you. So this is a terrible lesson, in my view, of the future of television. Broadcasting is, and this came up in the interview today, the radio interview, that broadcasting is in a different category. It is true, from the streamers, from the Netflix kind of shows, because they are restricted by the Broadcasting Act, which does bring up, or you mentioned it, the word freedom. That's a big thematic for the MAGA crowd. Freedom, First Amendment rights, freedom of speech. Boy, this has been central theme, and suddenly, oh, they didn't like that, and they want to stop people from saying things that they don't approve. It sounds extremely contradictory to me. So I think a couple of things to make, though, in fairness, about freedom. One is, freedom is not unlimited. Like, people go on about freedom, it actually has limits. It has limits in law. If you say something and allege something, you can be sued. So in civil court, you can be sued. You can't, I went to Law 101, and one of the first things you learn is you cannot yell fire in a crowded theater. So there is a limit to that. They use that as the analogy of freedom is not unlimited. There are limits to freedom in a civilized society. So that is true. I don't think this crossed the freedom line. I really don't. But you know what? That's why we have opinions. They always say, if you don't really like it, well, let's just change the channel. That's the best thing of all of this. You're not forcing people to watch one network.
So
Yeah.
the band is striking up next door. The Brits are having a band there
A
tonight, and
reception of some kind.
a
Yeah, yeah,
reception. Yeah,
yeah.
it's all fun. It's all
So,
good.
but anyway, just to wind this up then,
Yeah,
um, okay, we're left now with this, and we're left in a world where these divided echo chambers will probably never unite. There won't be common ground. I was asked today, do you think Jimmy Kimmel will be back? I don't believe he will. I believe whatever they're going to try to force him to do or say, he's not going to do it because it really does damage his
do you
credibility if he
think he'll
does
go
so.
to a streaming channel?
I think he will. I think that's the future for him. I think Stephen Colbert will do the same thing. Then you are quite free because it's not a broadcasting outlet. So I think this is really where a lot of these ones end up going. And Mr. Stern there on radio,
Serious.
he really went to Sirius FM, and so he ended up going there because not FM, Sirius XM, I should say, and he went there, and he's not restricted anything he has to say. So I think it's probably the remedy for a lot of these in the end. Love to hear from you. Sign up, subscribe to our Substack post here, and we do like to have you come on board and please ask us questions. We'd love to answer them, and we look forward to our next visit with you. Thank you so much.
Bye bye. Thanks for watching.